Hey guys, so I'm going to read to you from chapter 12 of I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. It is a rough chapter. Maya Angelou had some pretty life-defining moments in her childhood, and as you could probably tell by the previous chapter, there's a pretty big event coming up in the one that I'm about to read. So chapter 12 has some mature content, just so you're aware. Okay, guys, I had to move locations because it was too much of a disruption in the other place for me to record. So here we go for chapter 12 of I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. On a late spring Saturday, after our chores, nothing like those in stamps, were done, Bailey and I were going out, he to play baseball and I to the library. Mr. Freeman said to me after Bailey had gone downstairs, "Reedy, go get some milk for the house." Mother usually brought milk when she came in, but that morning as Bailey and I straightened the living room, her bedroom door had been open and we knew that she hadn't come home the night before. He gave me the money and I rushed to the store and back to the house. After putting the milk in the icebox, I turned and had just reached the front door when I heard Reedy. He was sitting in the big chair by the radio. "Reedy, come here." I didn't think about the holding time until I got close to him. His pants were open and his thing was standing out of its breeches by itself. "No, sir, Mr. Freeman." I started to back away. I didn't want to touch that mushy hard thing again, and I didn't need him to hold me anymore. He grabbed my arm and pulled me between his legs. His face was still and looked kind, but he didn't smile or blink his eyes. Nothing. He did not, except reach his left hand around to turn on the radio without even looking at it. Over the noise of music and static, he said, "Now this ain't gonna hurt you much. You liked it before, didn't you?" I didn't want to admit that I had in fact liked his holding me, or that I had liked his smell or the heart beating, so I said nothing, and his face became like the face of one of those mean natives the Phantom was always having to beat up. His legs were squeezing my waist. "Pull down your drawers." I hesitated for two reasons. He was holding me too tight to move, and I was sure that any minute my mother or Bailey or the Green Hornet would burst in the door and save me. We was just playing before. He released me enough to snatch down my bloomers, and he dragged me closer to him. Turning the radio up loud, too loud, he said, "If you scream, I'm going to kill you. And if you tell, I'm going to kill Bailey." I could tell he meant what he said. I couldn't understand why he wanted to kill my brother. Neither of us had done anything to him. And then there was the pain, a breaking and entering when even the senses are torn apart. The act of rape on an 8-year-old body is a matter of the needle giving because the camel can't. The child gives because the body can, and the mind of the violator cannot. I thought I had died. I woke up in a white-walled world, and it had to be heaven. But Mr. Freeman was there, and he was washing me. His hands shook, but he held me upright in the tub and washed my legs. "I didn't mean to hurt you, Reedy. I didn't mean it. But don't you tell. Remember, don't you tell a soul." I felt cool and very clean and just a little tired. "No, sir, Mr. Freeman, I won't tell." I was somewhere above everything. "It's just that I'm so tired. I'll just go and lay down a while, please," I whispered to him. I thought if I spoke out loud, he might become frightened and hurt me again. He dried me and handed me my bloomers. "Put these on and go to the library. Your mama ought to be coming home soon. You just act natural." Walking down the street, I felt the wet on my pants, and my hips seemed to be coming out of their sockets. I couldn't sit long on the hard seats in the library. They had been constructed for children. So I walked by the empty lot where Bailey was playing ball, but he wasn't there. I stood for a while and watched the big boys tear around the dusty diamond and then headed home. After 2 blocks, I knew I'd never make it. Not unless I counted every step and stepped on every crack. I had started to burn between my legs more than the time I'd wasted Sloane's liniment on myself. My legs throbbed, or rather the insides of my thighs throbbed, with the same force that Mr. Freeman's heart had beaten. Thrum step, step on the crack. Thrum step. I went up the stairs one at a time. No one was in the living room, so I went straight to bed after hiding my red and yellow stained drawers under the mattress. When Mother came in, she said, "Well, young lady, I believe this is the first time I've seen you go to bed without being told. You must be sick." I wasn't sick, but the pit of my stomach was on fire. How could I tell her that? Bailey came in later and asked me what the matter was. There was nothing to tell him. When Mother called us to eat, I said I wasn't hungry. She laid her cool hand on my forehead and cheeks. Maybe it's the measles. They say they're going around the neighborhood. After she took my temperature, she said, "You have a little fever. You've probably just caught them." Mr. Freeman took up the whole doorway. Then Bailey ought not to be in there with her, unless you want a house full of sick children. She answered over her shoulder, "He may as well have them now as later. Get them over with." She brushed by Mr. Freeman as if he were made of cotton. "Come on, Junior, get some cool towels and wipe your sister's face." As Bailey left the room, Mr. Freeman advanced to the bed. He leaned over, his whole face a threat that could have smothered me. "If you tell," and again so softly I almost didn't hear it. "If you tell." I couldn't summon up the energy to answer him. He had to know that I wasn't going to tell anything. Bailey came in with the towels and Mr. Freeman walked out. Later, Mother made a broth and sat on the edge of the bed to feed me. The liquid went down my throat like bones. My belly and behind were as heavy as cold iron, but it seemed my head had gone away and pure air had replaced it on my shoulders. Bailey read to me from the Rover Boys until he got sleepy and went to bed. That night I kept waking to hear Mother and Mr. Freeman arguing. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I did hope that she wouldn't make him so mad that he'd hurt her too. I knew he could do it with his cold face and empty eyes. Their voices came in faster and faster, the high sounds and the heels of the lows. I would have liked to have gone in, just passed through as if I were going to the toilet, just show my face and they might stop. My legs refused to move. I could move the toes and ankles, but the knees had turned to wood. Maybe I slept, but soon morning was there and Mother was pretty over my bed. "How are you feeling, baby?" "Fine, Mother," an instinctive answer. "Where's Bailey?" She said he was still asleep, but that she hadn't slept all night. She had been in my room off and on to see about me. I asked her where Mr. Freeman was, and her face chilled with remembered anger. "He's gone, moved this morning. I'm going to take your temperature after I put on your cream of wheat." Could I tell her now? The terrible pain assured me that I couldn't. What he did to me and what I allowed must have been very bad if already God had let me hurt so much. If Mr. Freeman was gone, did that mean Bailey was out of danger? And if so, if I told him, would he still love me? After Mother took my temperature, she said she was going to bed for a while, but to wake her if I felt sicker. She told Bailey to watch my face and arms for spots. When they came up, he could paint them with calamine lotion. That Sunday goes and comes my memory like a bad connection on an overseas telephone call. Once Bailey was reading The Cats and Jammer Kids to me, and then without a pause for sleeping, Mother was looking closely at my face, and soup trickled down my chin, and some got in my mouth, and I choked. Then there was the doctor who took my temperature and held my wrist. "Bailey," I suppose I had screamed, for he materialized suddenly, and I asked him to help me, and we'd run away out to California or France or Chicago. I knew that I was dying, and in fact longed for death, but I didn't want to die anywhere near Mr. Freeman. I knew that even now he wouldn't have allowed death to have me unless he wished it to. Mother said I should be bathed and the linens had to be changed since I had sweat so much. But when they tried to move me, I fought, and even Bailey couldn't hold me. Then she picked me up in her arms, and the terror abated for a while. Bailey began to change the bed. As he pulled off the soiled sheets, he dislodged the panties I had put under the mattress. They fell at Mother's feet. Okay, Chapter 13. In the hospital, Bailey told me that I had to tell who did that to me, or the man would hurt another little girl. When I explained that I couldn't tell because the man would kill him, Bailey said knowingly, "He can't kill me. I won't let him." And of course I believed him. Bailey didn't lie to me, so I told him. Bailey cried at the side of my bed until I started to cry too. Almost 15 years passed before I saw my brother cry again. Using the old brain he was born with, those were his words later on that day, he gave his information to Grandmother Baxter, and Mr. Freeman was arrested and was spared the awful wrath of my pistol-whipping uncles. I would have liked to stay in the hospital the rest of my life. Mother brought flowers and candy. Grandmother came with fruit, and my uncles clumped around and around my bed, snorting like wild horses. When they were able to sneak Bailey in, he read to me for hours. The saying that people who have nothing to do become busybodies is not the only truth. Excitement is a drug, and people whose lives are filled with violence are always wondering what the next where the next fix is coming from. The court was filled. Some people even stood behind the church-like benches in the rear. Overhead fans moved with a detachment of old men. Grandmother Baxter's clients were there in gay and flippant array. The gamblers in pinstripe suits and their makeup, deep women whispered to me out of red blood mouths that now I knew were as much as they did. I was 8 and grown. Even the nurses in the hospital had told me that now I had nothing to fear. The worst is over for you, they had said. So I put the words in all the smirking mouths. I sat with my family. Bailey couldn't come, and they rested still on the seats like solid, cold gray tombstones, thick and forevermore unmoving. Poor Mr. Freeman twisted in his chair to look empty threats over to me. He didn't know that he couldn't kill Bailey, and Bailey didn't lie to me. What was the defendant wearing? That was Mr. Freeman's lawyer. I don't know. You mean to say this man raped you and you don't know what he was wearing? He snickered as if I had raped Mr. Freeman. Do you know if you were raped? A sound pushed in the air of the court. I was sure it was laughter. I was glad that Mother had let me wear the navy blue winter coat with brass buttons. Although it was too short and the weather was typical, St. Louis was hot, the coat was a friend that I hugged to me in that strange and unfriendly place. Was that the first time the accused touched you? The question stopped me. Mr. Freeman had surely done something very wrong, but I was convinced that I had helped him to do it. I didn't want to lie, but the lawyer wouldn't let me think, so I used silence as a retreat. Did the accused try to touch you before that time or rather, you say, he raped you? I couldn't say yes and tell them how he had loved me once for a few minutes and how he had held me close before he thought I had peed the bed. My uncles would kill me, and Grandmother Baxter would stop speaking, as she often did when she was angry. And all those people in the court would stone me as they had stoned the harlot in the Bible. And Mother, who thought I was such a good girl, would be so disappointed. But most important, there was Bailey. I had kept a big secret from him. Marguerite answered the question. Did the accused touch you before the occasion on which you claim he raped you? Everyone in the court knew the answer had to be no. Everyone except Mr. Freeman and me. I looked at his heavy face, trying to look as if he would have liked me to say no. I said no. The lie lumped in my throat and I couldn't get air. How I despised the man for making me lie. Old, mean, nasty thing. Old, black, nasty thing. The tears didn't soothe my heart as they usually did. I screamed, "Old, mean, dirty thing, you dirty old thing." Our lawyer brought me off the stand to my mother's arms. The fact that I had arrived at my desired destination by lies made it less appealing to me. Mr. Freeman was given 1 year and 1 day, but he never got a chance to do his time. His lawyer, or someone, got him released that very afternoon. In the living room, where the shades were drawn for coolness, Bailey and I played Monopoly on the floor. I played a bad game because I was thinking how I would be able to tell Bailey how I had lied, and even worse for our relationship, kept a secret from him. Bailey answered the doorbell because Grandmother was in the kitchen. A tall white policeman asked for Mrs. Baxter. Had they found out about the lie? Maybe the policeman was coming to put me in jail because I had sworn in the Bible that everything I said would be the truth, the whole truth, so help me God. The man in our living room was taller than the sky and whiter than my image of God. He just didn't have the beard. Mrs. Baxter, I thought you ought to know. Freeman's been found dead on the lot behind the slaughterhouse. Softly, as if she were discussing a church program, she said, "Poor man." She wiped her hand on the dish towel and just as softly asked, "They know who did it?" The policeman said, "Seems like he was dropped there. Some say he was kicked to death." Grandmother's color only rose a little. "Tom, thanks for telling me. Poor man. Well, maybe it's better this way. He was a mad dog. Would you like a glass of lemonade or some beer?" Although he looked harmless, I knew he was a dreadful angel counting out my many sins. "No thanks, Mrs. Baxter. I'm on duty. Gotta be getting back." "Well, tell your ma that I'll be over when I take up my beer and remind her to save some kraut for me." And the recording angel was gone. He was gone, and a man was dead because I lied. Where was the balance in that? One lie surely wouldn't be worth a man's life. Bailey could have explained it all to me, but I didn't dare ask him. Obviously, I had forfeited my place in heaven forever, and I was as gutless as the doll I had ripped to pieces ages ago. Even Christ himself turned his back on Satan. Wouldn't he turn his back on me? I could feel the evilness flow through my body and waiting pent up to rush off my tongue if I tried to open my mouth. I clamped my teeth shut. I'd hold it in. If it escaped, wouldn't it flood the world and all the innocent people? Grandmother Baxter said, "Reedy Jr., you didn't hear a thing. I never want to hear the situation, nor that evil man's name mentioned in my house again. I mean that." She went back to the kitchen to make apple strudel for my celebration. Even Bailey was frightened. He sat all to himself, looking at a man's death, a kitten looking at a wolf, not quite understanding it, but frightened all the same. In those moments, I decided that although Bailey loved me, he couldn't help. I had sold myself to the devil, and there could be no escape. The only thing I could do was to stop talking to people other than Bailey. Instinctively or somehow, I knew that because I loved him so much, I'd never hurt him. But if I talked to anyone else, that person might die too. Just my breath carrying my words out might poison people, and they'd curl up and die like the black fat slugs that only pretended. I had to stop talking. I discovered that to achieve perfect personal silence, all I had to do was to attach myself leech-like to sound. I began to listen to everything. I probably hoped that after I had heard all the sounds, really heard them and packed them down deep in my ears, the world would be quiet around me. I walked into rooms where people were laughing, their voices hitting the walls like stones, and I simply stood still. In the midst of the riot of sound, after a minute or two, silence would rush into the room from its hiding place because I had eaten up all the sounds. In the first weeks, my family accepted my behavior as a post-rape, post-hospital affliction. Neither the term nor the experience was mentioned in grandmother's house, where Bailey and I were again staying. They understood that I could talk to Bailey, but to no one else. Then came the last visit from the visiting nurse, and the doctor said I was healed. That meant I should be back on the sidewalks playing handball or enjoying the games I had been given when I was sick. When I refused to be the child they knew and accepted me to be, I was called impudent, and they muted my mutinous sullenness. For a while, I was punished for being so uppity that I wouldn't speak, and then came the thrashings given by any relative who felt himself offended. We were on the train going back to Stamps, and this time it was I who had to console Bailey. He cried his heart out down the aisles of the coach and pressed his little boy body against the window pane, looking for a last glimpse of his mother dear. I have never known if Mama sent for us or if the St. Louis family got fed up with my grim presence. There is nothing more appalling than a constantly morose child. I cared less about the trip than about the fact that Bailey was unhappy and had no more thought of our destination than if I had simply been heading for the toilet.